Alexei Navalny, one of Russia's most popular opposition leaders, has been hospitalized amid reports of poisoning. Navalny's spokesperson claimed that he was poisoned with a toxin mixed into his tea. Navalny was flying from Siberia to Moscow when he fell ill, prompting the pilot to make an emergency landing. Russian media reports indicate that Navalny's condition is serious. The prominent Kremlin critic is reportedly unconscious and on life support. His spokesperson said that the police have been called in to investigate the poisoning angle. Navalny has been traveling across Russia promoting a tactical voting strategy against pro-Putin candidates in their upcoming regional elections. Navalny has endured multiple attempts on his life. In 2017, he suffered burns to his eyes in a chemical attack. And then in August last year, he was hospitalized after developing rashes while in a police station in Moscow. He had been detained for his role in last year's anti-government protests in Moscow. Many government critics said at the time that he was most likely poisoned at the police station itself. Navalny is one of the most outspoken critics of President Putin. He has been arrested multiple times by Russian authorities. In 2018, Navalny launched a presidential bid only to be disqualified by the poll authorities. Now for more on this, we have Julia Chapman joining us live from Moscow. Julia, thank you so much for joining us. My first question to you is, to begin with, could you just run us through the events leading up to this and what is Navalny's condition like right now?
Well, we understand that he is in a serious but stable condition in hospital, in intensive care, in a hospital in Omsk in Siberia. We know that he's in a coma and that doctors have carried out a number of diagnostic tests, but they have not yet published the result of any of those. What we know about what happened this morning is that Alexei Navalny and his press secretary Kira Yarmysh were traveling from the city of Tomsk on their way back to Moscow. And while they were on the plane in flight, Navalny started to feel unwell and the plane made an emergency landing in the city of Omsk, where Navalny was carried off the plane by a stretcher and taken to hospital urgently. Now, Kira Yarmysh, his press secretary, says that initially there were suggestions by doctors that there may have been poisoning, that it may have been administered through a hot drink. She says he had a cup of tea at Tomsk airport before boarding the plane. S7, the airline with which they were flying, says he did not eat or drink anything while on board the flight. But the doctors at the hospital where he's being treated in Omsk have yet to be drawn on what the possible cause of this reaction is, and they say that poisoning is just one of the reasons, the possible reasons that they're looking into.
All right, my next question to you is it possible that the fact that Navalny is such a staunch critic of President Vladimir Putin had something to do with this? As we also know, Russia holds regional elections next month and Navalny and his allies have been preparing for them, trying to increase support for candidates which they back. Is it a coincidence that this would happen at such a time?
It's impossible to know and indeed dangerous to speculate, but of course Alexei Navalny has many enemies. He's been a very staunch critic of the Kremlin, but also he's carried out very high-profile anti-corruption investigations through his organization, the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which itself has been a target of lawsuits and has now had to shut down in its existing form in order to move on from those lawsuits because they were simply getting too big for the organization to handle. So there are a lot of people who might wish Alexei Navalny harm. There's no confirmation that he has been attacked yet. The investigative committee has opened a criminal case into the potential poisoning, although they say poisoning is not actually one of the possible reasons that they're immediately looking into. We understand that there are more police in the hospital than doctors, according to Alexei Navalny's press secretary. There are certainly a lot of police around who are looking into the possible causes for his illness, but we do understand that he's in a very serious condition and it's unclear how he got there.
All right, and what are the views of the people of opposition and critics of the government on this? This is not the first time that something like this has happened. He was just last year, in fact, admitted once before. So have they made any statements yet?
They haven't made any accusations, certainly, but of course he has had certain incidents in the past. 3 years ago, he was attacked with a green dye, a chemical in his face that stained his entire face green. He suffered eye trauma as a result of that attack, which he eventually recovered from. And last year, while in prison serving a short sentence for organizing protests ahead of the regional and local elections, he had a skin condition that was developing and he had to be taken to hospital, and he was diagnosed with contact dermatitis, but he believes that he was exposed to a toxic substance while behind bars. So he's certainly a very high profile figure and a possible target, but there's still certainly no confirmation that he has been targeted in this instance.
Okay, so do we yet know the government's stance on this? Have they commented on this yet?
They haven't, no. The government tends to avoid all mention of Alexei Navalny if they can help it. The Kremlin views him as an odious opposition figure, but they don't give him any legitimacy. He is often blocked from taking part in any television debates or any kind of coverage whatsoever. So generally, the Kremlin and other government officials try to avoid any mention of him, and we have yet to understand whether there's been any response from the government to this possible poisoning.
All right, Julia, thank you so much for joining us with all those details. We will definitely update our viewers as and when we have more on this.